to order. Good afternoon and welcome. The Traffic and Parking Advisory Board reviews items of interest regarding parking and traffic items. We are an advisory board, and our favorable recommendation today will go before the Oshkosh Common Council. The council can either accept or reject any recommendation from this board. If you do not agree with our decision, you can discuss that item with any council member. If the board does not recommend an item, a common council member may in fact sponsor a new ordinance regarding that same item. All items do require 2 readings before the Oshkosh Common Council. The first reading on today's agenda items will take place on Tuesday, March 22nd at 6 p.m., and you will be allowed to comment on the item at that time, though the council will in fact take no action. On Tuesday, April 12th at 6 p.m., the item will be on a second reading, at which time the council will in fact take action. You will again be allowed to speak at that time. For this afternoon's meeting, I will read each agenda item, at which time, if you'd like to speak, please step to the podium. Please provide both your name and address. I do ask that you keep your comments pertinent to the agenda item. The item will then come back to this board for discussion and then action. Please call a roll for attendance purposes.
Schneider.
Here.
Jasinski.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
Becker.
Here. All right, first item on today's agenda is in fact public comment. Seeing that there's no one in the audience, which means there cannot be a public comment, we are going to move directly to approval of minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
Anyone have any comments, questions, additions, or deletions to the minutes as provided? All right, seeing none, I am going to ask for the roll to be called on approval of minutes.
Schneider.
Aye.
Jasinski.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Becker.
Aye. Which then moves us to old business. I don't believe there is any for Mr. Collins. Which then again brings us to new business. Apparently there's been a request for no parking on West 6th Avenue on the south side from 190 feet west of Michigan Street to 231 feet west of Michigan.
Okay. He's not here. He said he was going to try to make it, but this is a request from Pingree Caswell. Basically, they're requesting no parking zone across the street from their loading docks. It looks like at one point there was a driveway here, which isn't there any longer. But the issue they're having is they occasionally have cars that park here, and then that makes it difficult for their trucks to access their docks. I did ask them, I looked it up, and the auto body shop that's located here owns this lot. So I did ask them if they've talked to their neighbors at all, because it's probably their customers and or employees that are parking there, and he said that he had, and their neighbors have been very accommodating. The issue they have is with visitors or people that are working in the area and aren't familiar with their needs. So when I was out there last time, it looked like some people doing construction on some houses over here, and they had been parking in this area, which they had since been asked to not do, which they didn't. But he said historically over the years it's become an issue, so he's just asking if we can post some no parking signs across from the loading dock here so that people know not to park there, and it's not an issue for their trucks to access their docks.
Could you point out where that would be on the picture drawing there?
Sure, where the no parking would be?
Yeah.
So it'd be from, I think I measured it from around this bush.
To the auto
To
body?
the driveway, yeah. And there's no other parking restrictions in this area, so there's plenty of on-street parking available.
Before we discuss any further, I do need to get a second, assuming someone's going to move
Second.
it. Okay. I'll move it, and Mr. Szynski will take the second. Mr. Collins, question for you. You obviously pointed out to us where it's going to be no parking. My question, though, is does that allow for the, if you will, the swing of the semi to actually back into that dock?
Right,
Because straight in and out isn't possible, obviously, as we all know.
right. Yeah, I didn't put a truck turning template on it or anything like that, but obviously their trucks, they said when nobody's parked there, they're able to access it, so I just took their word for it.
Well, my sincerest fear is someone's going to snuggle right up to that line And if it ain't enough, we've done nothing but cause another problem. So a solution in search of a problem, if you will. So,
It looks like it should be fine going west, maybe a problem going east, but.
well, it depends, I mean, I don't know, I'm assuming they have trucks coming from both directions. I don't know if, what the typical traffic pattern is there, but,
I mean, from the east, it might need to go a little further past the bush.
well, right, yeah, so I guess my thought is, why not look at it from the body shop to whatever's
The next house.
the next house? Because it's inconsequential, but it does allow for the
Maybe to
buffer.
that bigger tree, to the first tree instead of the bush.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at extending it more. I guess what I'd recommend then is I can talk to the manager here and see what he thinks he needs. He thought as long as it wasn't across, basically he said his concern is this area here. So I guess if we're meeting his needs, but we can extend it further if needed.
Well, I just don't want to be in a position to tell the owner of Pingree Caswell that we solved his problem and then have it not be solved because he's got a truck that's an oddball that's 15 or 10 or 15 feet longer than normal, and he can't make the swing or she can't make the swing to get into that dock. So I'd rather err on the side of caution.
Why don't we just go with the proposal as written for today, and then if need to lengthen out further, we can always do that in the future.
But that necessitates then pulling a sign and moving it 20 feet or whatever we decide, so.
Yeah, if you want to amend it to add 20 feet to the east, we could definitely do that. I mean,
I'm-
20 feet, we're probably looking at around, like you said, probably close to this tree, which would be fine. I think that, we don't want to restrict parking for this house or their guests, but I
Right.
think they would still have enough parking if we did that.
Well, arguably, there's 2 spots in front of their house, give or take.
Yep.
So, plus whatever's on the other side. of
Will
the
this
street.
only be on the weekend, or I mean during the week, and then the weekend you could have unlimited parking, or?
We were just posted no parking.
Yeah, to do day restrictions always becomes, in my opinion, a little sketch because I hate to say this, but some people don't know what day it is when they do things. But anyway, that being said, I'm going to put an amendment on the table to make it 20 feet further east for the exclusion for parking or the request for no parking. That's what we talked about.
So how will that, how will
So,
that read with the measurements that we have?
so would it be 200 and, no, it'd be 190 feet west
It'd be
to,
amended to 170 feet. Since I measured from Michigan.
oh, that's right, yeah. I was thinking about where the actual no parking started, but right. Mr. Collins is in fact correct. It would be from 170 feet west of Michigan to 231 feet west of Michigan.
Second.
Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, I'm going to ask that the roll be called on the amendment that sits on the table.
Schneider,
Aye.
Shazinski,
Aye.
Christensen,
Aye.
Hanson. Aye. Becker.
Aye. So now we are back to the motion in chief, which is now a request for no parking on West 6th, south side from 210 feet west of Michigan to 231 feet west of Michigan. Any additional discussion?
It would actually be 170.
Oh, did I? Sorry. Apparently I need to switch to leaded soda as opposed to unleaded soda. My bad. Thank you for keeping me honest, Mr. Collins. But anyway, any additional conversation, discussion on the item in chief? Seeing none, I'm going to ask that the roll be called. On the-
Wandschneider,
Aye.
Jazinski.
Aye.
Christensen,
Aye.
Hanson. Aye. Becker.
Aye. Which then brings us to board and commission roles, process, and procedure training.
All right.
Collins.
Well, we have Lynn and Amy here from our legal department, and they can kind of take over. But they recently updated, and the council approved some revisions to the board and commission rules and procedures. So they're going to go over some of that information and answer any questions.
All right. So you should have received a copy of the new Board and Commission rules that were passed by the council in December. Basically, they update and reorganize things a little bit. They add a few new items. Substantively, there aren't a ton of changes, but I'll run through those. And then Amy's just going to do a real quick refresher on open meetings, public records, and ethics as well for you guys, so that you are all covered again for training. The new rules start out with scheduling and location of meetings. These have not really changed. You'll hold regular meetings at a regular time and place. Special meetings can be called if they're needed. We publicly notice them. I'm gonna put that off for Amy to deal with. And when technology and staffing are available, the city does provide the ability to have those streamed and broadcast, but that isn't always available for every board or commission.
Question before you
Yeah.
proceed. If a need arises for us to hold a meeting on site for an issue, I use this as an example.
Yep.
If it made more sense for us to actually be there to see the actual potential ramifications, is that permissible?
It is permissible as long as wherever you're holding it is still open and accessible to the public. And, so that if I, as a member of the public, wanted to come as well, I can watch the meeting and be there. If you just need to do a site visit, you guys can go on your own. We generally tell you, if you've gone in and looked at the site, just let everybody know I stopped and looked at it and what you saw, so that everybody has the benefit of that information. But, if you're going as a whole group, it would have to be to someplace that's publicly accessible, and that they can be there and view what the board is doing.
Does the fact that this meeting is televised play a role in that process or that issue?
There you would have to talk to IT or media and see. They most likely are going to tell you they would not go along, would be my guess. But because
that-
it's not required that you be televised, you can have meetings that aren't televised. But my guess is they're going to tell you, if you do something like that, they probably are not going to have the ability to do that. I don't want to speak for them.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, remote participation, because of the last 2 years and the experiences we've had, the staff looked at it and council looked at this and said, there are some good things with remote participation that we actually figured out how to do now, we want to hang on to. But generally, the council made a determination that if we can be in person, we want to be in person. Fair? I'm going to look at you because you're right here. But there are certain times that it maybe makes sense to allow someone to appear remotely if there is someone who is unable to because of a physical disability or something like that. That there are some now provisions in our rules that allow us to deal with those issues. If the board would have a expert working with you on something that's from out of state, we had at one of the last council meetings an engineer that appeared remotely because it was expensive to have her come in from wherever it was she was actually appearing from it on that occasion. So we adapted the rules and we do allow some of those kind of things to happen. And it's meant more for the more extraordinary circumstances. Generally, board and commission members need to be present. to be able to participate and vote, though. If we would have a situation where boards and commissions go back into all virtual, obviously, then you would not have to be present. But generally, in order to participate as a board member, the rules say you should be present to be in person and voting on that. Basically, if we do have a remote participation, the rules are going to be the same as what we had during the COVID, where you want to have a computer. We aren't responsible if somebody has a computer and it doesn't work well or their Wi-Fi isn't good. They need to be able to assure that they can connect. We'll provide the links to connect, but they need to make sure there's some place that provides them the ability to connect. If you're on there, mute when you're not presenting or talking. Yep.
Which goes to my first question. If the board is meeting if the board is meeting off-site with no technology, speak to how that plays. Meaning, we're standing on a street corner. That sounds horrible to say, but we are.
So what is statutorily required and what we like to do are probably two different things. Amy will talk a little bit about what is statutorily required. Basically, that just says we have to notice a meeting and permit the public the opportunity to be present and view the meeting. So we could do a meeting on a street corner, all in person, and provide no remote participation. No, you have to show up to, if you're the public and you want to see the meeting. That meets what the statute requires. The city of Oshkosh generally goes above and beyond what the statute requires. Televising is not required. Taping it to put on our webpage and be accessible on or after meetings is not required. We do that to allow more people the opportunity to view it and potentially to also participate that way. But that's not required by statute. So if, again, and it would take coordination if you wanted to go to a remote site and if you wanted technology there and if you wanted the media services people there, the rules say you have to coordinate with IT and media services, and they can say yes or no based on if they have people available and if they have the capability of, if we want to do it live, remote, at the time, if they can even do that. So that would be something that you would say, hey, we want to do this, coordinate with IT and see if they can get somebody there.
But that shouldn't be the be-all, end-all, the fact that IT can't be there for the meeting. Is that what I heard you say?
It is not the be-all, end-all. You can still have your meeting as long as you notice it and tell people, we are going to meet at 5 o'clock this evening at this street corner.
Interesting, because, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, Lynn, and Mr. Collins will potentially attest, hopefully. I asked for a meeting to be held prior to all meetings going virtual because of the COVID crisis to be held in Menominee Park, and was told that was impossible to do because we couldn't get TV coverage in Menominee Park.
I don't think that was the only reason. I think it was
involved.
more, it was more during COVID, and I think it was more to maintain consistency with all the board's processes where you could do in person if it was masked.
Oh, okay.
So I think that in order to be consistent with what was going on with the rest of the city boards and commissions, the city manager said that, we weren't going to do it at that time.
We weren't going to hold meetings out in the open
Right.
because of that.
Yeah.
That may be, I don't.
I mean, not having TV is a
Specifically
contributing
recall if that was
factor,
involved
but
with that,
I
but-
think that was more the reason.
We've had meetings in
Yeah.
other rooms at City Hall that, without
That-
television, that
Yep.
And that was the point I raised, Dan, at the time, that we've had meetings in other rooms where no TV coverage was available. So why can't we meet in a park shelter outside, 10 feet apart?
It may have been at that time, what we were doing with one board or commission was what we were doing with all of them, and we were not gonna either require them all or encourage them all to be meeting out in park shelters. I don't recall it specifically. Sorry if I was involved, I just don't remember, but that would be my guess, is they were trying to keep the rules consistent across those boards and commissions. That might make sense. Okay. Let's see. I lost my train of thought, but the next section is actually a new section. It's a new section in terms of the rules and the verbiage. It's not really a new process. It's the rules pertaining to placement of matters on agendas. And some of the boards and commissions and some of the council members had asked for a better explanation of how items get on different boards and commission agendas and how they flow through a board and commission and to council. So in the next section, you're going to find first a kind of a description of where boards and commissions fit in our form of government. So the city of Oshkosh is a council manager form of government. So the council is responsible for establishing policy, passing ordinances, adopting the budget, adopting the strategic plan, appropriating the money to pay for all that stuff, and kind of developing that overall vision for the city. The city manager then is responsible for implementing that and managing the daily operations of the city. And boards and commissions support both of those functions. So you may be advisory to the city manager on some things and to council on some things. There are different types of boards and commissions. They generally fall in three categories: advisory, independent, and hearings and appeals. You guys are primarily going to be advisory. The parking issue that you had tonight, that's a decision you review it, you give a recommendation to the council, they take your advice, and then they make the final action on it. Independent is more like RDA, the library board, Plan Commission in some things is independent, some things they're advisory. The hearings and appeals, there are Board of Review, Board of Appeals, and Police and Fire Commission actually have things that they hold more almost like informal court hearings on. So those are the three types of boards or commissions. I'm going to focus on advisory, which is the first one in the packet with you guys. They have a flow chart that looks like this. And because most of your stuff I think it's going to be very rare, if at all, that you have something that wouldn't be advisory. So that's the one we're going to focus on. Items that come before you have to be related to your purpose or your jurisdiction as defined by the ordinances, or be referred to your board for input from council. Items will get prioritized based on the urgency of the particular circumstances, the time commitment required. If it's a bigger project, Jim may say, I can't quite get that done before the next meeting. I'm going to put it out, several meetings. Or they may require some outside expertise. If you are looking at a plan for a broader parking plan for this city, you may have outside experts that you hire, engineers or something, and that may require it to be put out for a while. Items generally are going to be placed on your agenda kind of in three ways. It's going to come by an application from somebody like tonight. I want parking on, I forgot what street we're on, 6th Avenue. And so I make an application to you. A board or commission member or a council member or the council is going to ask you to take a look at something and say, hey, parking is really crazy in the downtown. We think that we should take a look at the overall parking along Main Street. Or staff is going to come to you and say, we're looking at this or that issue. We need some advice and we want to see what the commission thinks or give us direction on something. once the item comes up, it's going to be put on your agenda, and that gets back to what Amy's going to cover with open meetings. It gets placed on the agenda so that the public knows, can provide input if they want. We have, Jim will review it generally, look at it and say, maybe is there another department that can provide some input on this, or another board or commission? Is it something that even belongs in front of my commission? If somebody comes to the parking, with a parking question in Menominee Park, you guys don't cover the parking, right? Okay, you looked at me for a second, I thought I was wrong on that. You don't cover the parking in Menominee Park, Jim would say, thanks, you should probably be talking to the Parks Board instead. The benefit of that I think with the Board of Commission for you guys is, again, I think this stuff has flowed pretty well through your Board of Commission. We have some newer staff in some of our other boards and staffing some of our other boards and commissions. The flow chart also provides feedback. So it directs those staff, especially newer staff coming in, make sure you go back and tell your board or commission what happened with this. If you referred it to another board or commission, make sure you tell them that it was referred off, so that things don't just go into a black hole. If it goes to council, the parking issue on 6th here, when it goes to the council, it tells Jim, hey, report back and let your board or commission know, yes, council passed it, the person showed up and asked for an even bigger area, and it got changed, or whatever happened with it. So I think that the real benefit of the flow chart with is to just lay out that process and kind of help also with that reporting back function. Generally, the independent board is going to follow the same kind of thing. It's just their stuff doesn't go to council in the end. Hearings and appeals, they're not going to get those advisory kind of things. It's all going to be on an application from an applicant. They're going to go right to a hearing, and they are generally going to be the final adjudicator of their things. After you get through that section, most of the rest of this is going to look really familiar to you. Quorum, it talks about a quorum, a majority of your membership shall constitute a quorum. Jim gave us the hint before the meeting, 4 is your quorum, so a lesser number can adjourn, and a majority of those present and voting are required to move anything forward. Attendance excusal, we ask you if you can give at least 24 hours notice, because we do allow for, I realize you guys are not up to full strength, so to speak, but we do allow for the appointment of alternates. 24 hours notice gives Jim a chance to call the alternates and say, hey, you're on deck, we're gonna need you tomorrow, and so that hopefully we don't have to reschedule a meeting. And then the rules chart is in there again. Nothing in that chart has changed from, if you've been familiar with that, that did not change at all from the last, those rules all kind of stayed the same. And then the final thing that I'm going to address just very quickly, because we didn't really emphasize it in the past, but unfortunately we've had a few issues lately, is rules of decorum. I don't know, hopefully things will calm down again, but we have had a couple of issues lately. What we have found works is if someone is disruptive, if they aren't responding to your, generally, I have full faith in you that you're going to tell them, hey,
Oh, sorry.
come to order. Yeah. You need to stop yelling, swearing, whatever it is. If they do not, what we found worked well is just take a break. If you take a break and you are televised, they will cut the cameras at that point, give everybody a chance to calm down. If staff is comfortable, generally, they will approach the person and say, we need to calm down, try and get that. If you can get the person calmed down, which we have had some success with, can then start back up and return to the meeting. If you can't, if you need the police, we suggest you call the police if it is somebody who is genuinely out of control or if you feel threatened in any way. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but typically we've kind of glossed over this in the training in the past, and unfortunately we've had a couple of incidents with council and with with at least one board and commission, and so we want to make sure everybody understands it's okay to take a break, it's okay to stop the meeting if you need to, and it's okay to call the police if you do need to. So that's kind of it for my part. Unless there are questions, we'll let Amy hit, and then we can.
Yeah.
Actually, before we move on,
Yeah.
I do have one question. One thing that I've longed to see on our agenda on a regular basis, Mr. Collins, and I asked this question in your presence, Lynn, only because I want to make sure we do this properly, but this board, and I don't know the history of other boards, but sure would be nice if this board did a Pledge of Allegiance prior to the meeting. So how does one make that happen?
I think you can make, that's a rule you can make for your board or commission. I know we do it for council. I don't think any of the other boards and commissions do it. If they do, I'm not aware of it, but that's just a rule that you can make. It doesn't conflict with the council rules. They don't require it. They don't address it at all. So that would be something that as a board or commission,
Forgive me, I forgot
the
your name.
majority could decide.
Amy. So at this point, Amy, would it be appropriate for me to take a straw vote on adding the Pledge of Allegiance to our agenda?
Well, not until I am done presenting, but if you want to put
Okay,
it on
then.
the agenda at a later date
There you go.
and notice it out.
Yeah, I think, so basically what you're saying, I think we'd have to add it to, like, the next agenda.
Yes, and Amy will explain why.
My timing was impeccable again. All right, go ahead.
All right, so I'm covering open meetings, public records, and ethics. Okay. Nothing I'm presenting on today should have changed from the last time you were trained on it. It should just be a refresher for everyone. So starting out with open meetings, as we've kind of already talked about, what Wisconsin law requires is that those meetings are reasonably accessible and open to the public. But the question is then raised, what is an open meeting? There are two tests that you need to be concerned about: the purpose test and the numbers test. The purpose test is satisfied if you are getting together for the purpose of discussing or gathering information on a matter that's likely to come before you, or if you're exercising responsibilities, authority, power, duties delegated to your board. Talking about Oshkosh Restaurant Week and all five of you are together doesn't satisfy the purpose test. If you're talking about parking on 6th Ave, that would. So purpose test and then numbers test. Now numbers test is what it sounds like. It's how many of you are talking or getting together. The presumption starts at half. But keep in mind it can get smaller depending upon circumstance, because the test is really just the number that's necessary to influence the action before the board. So in your case, quorum is 4. If only 4 of you showed up for a meeting, which is how we started today, it would only take 2 of you to kill an action. Because 2 of you voting against it you wouldn't have a majority and the action would die. So depending upon circumstance, how many people are appearing, you start with the presumption of half, but it could get less. So just keep that in mind for your board. There are circumstances to keep in mind that something may be an open meeting that's not necessarily in this room noticed out, or like your typical meeting. I'm going to go through a few of those more obscure ones that you may not think about. So bringing up written correspondence first. Written correspondence generally won't be considered an open meeting because it's generally just a one-way exchange of information. You're receiving information maybe before a meeting. that may not, it's typically not going to be seen as an open meeting. But when you get to telephone calls and particularly emails, when things start to become more conversational, telephone calls, absolutely, especially if you're satisfying that numbers test, or let's say you're on a conference call. It's not what you'd consider as a formal meeting, but under state law, that could be an open meeting. Email, the AG's office specifically does not recommend that board members use email as a means of communication. Primary reason is because it's so easy to accidentally click reply all. So let's say you just wanted to talk with one of your other board members, but you accidentally click reply all, and now we've started this email chain that's essentially an open meeting, but just not noticed out and not in front
And a
of the
lot of
public.
email gets very conversational.
Yeah.
But to your example, 2 is the magic number. So if one board member emails another one, we all of a sudden have a
Could be.
potential
The
problem.
2 could be the magic number. I mean.
But you don't know that until
You
meeting
know
day.
it. So you are taking a risk,
Yep,
yes.
you are exactly correct. Walking quorum, quickly cover that. Walking quorum is where you talk to one person. Maybe in the situation you're okay with a numbers test. So I talk to Lynn, maybe we'll be okay. But then Lynn goes and talks to Courtney. And now we've hit 3 people, and even if we weren't all in the same room at the same time, could be an open meeting. And then finally, just something to consider, if you ever want to go to a different board and commission, we advise that you, to gather information, we advise you tell staff, because again, if enough of you are going just to get information, that may be a meeting of your board that needs to be noticed out as well. That's all to be said. All of this is not to discourage you from communication and talking about the issues that are going before your board. We just need to make sure that when we're doing it, we're noticing it out and providing the public with notice. I'll go through what's required here in a second. But again, we're not trying to discourage it. We're just trying to encourage it legally. So you go through your test. If it is an open meeting, what is required is that we have to notice the meeting out to the public and the media. We have to let them know of the topics that are going to be discussed and items that will be acted on. So for your example, for the pledge, that just needs to be noticed out to the public. That makes sense. Timing, it has to be 24 hours in advance. We recommend 72 as good practice. Closed session, you guys probably won't deal with that, so I'm not going to go through it. If it comes up, you can always contact our office. Accessibility, the meeting has to be accessible to the public. Keep in mind ADA considerations. Tape recording, videotaping is okay as long as that person is not becoming disruptive, getting in your face with their recorder. Citizen participation. This kind of goes to some of your questions at the beginning of, do we have them call in by TV or phone, or what's available technology-wise? Under state law, and where Lynn was getting at, state law is different than maybe what we recommend or advise at the city. State law actually does not even provide that citizens have to participate. Under open meeting law, they just have to be able to observe, the right to attend and observe. That's all they have. That being said, all of our boards and commissions do allow some form of citizen participation. What we would advise you do is if you don't already, just have a policy of what does that look like. And by that I mean, talk about how long does an individual get to talk? What do they get to talk about? And when does that happen? That may help you in the future with in the event you come across a disruptive citizen. Say I want to, get on my soapbox and talk about something that's going on in the city of Appleton, and I want to do it for an hour. Have a policy ahead of time that, no, Ms. Vanden Hogen, it has to be on, XYZ item, and you have 5 minutes. But have that in your pocket ahead of time to deal with those situations. Then finally, the only thing that's required is that there does need to be a record of the motions and roll call votes made Generally, staff is going to do that for you. Additional information can obviously go in your minutes as well, but that's what's required at a minimum. So that is a very quick review of open meetings. Before I jump to public records, do you have any questions? Seeing none, I will continue on. Public records. This one is a pretty quick review. Generally speaking, you won't need to worry about public records because staff is going to do that for you. For example, if there was a request for all communication from your board to the public within the last month, the staff will be the one to take the first crack at responding to that. In order for staff to do that, though, they need all the information at their disposal. And the reason I bring that up is, say you receive a letter from the public, right? They send it to you directly. What we advise is that you immediately make a copy or provide that copy to staff. And you're doing that so you're taking yourself out of the equation, that you know that everything you've received physically, they have a copy of. So they can respond to those record requests. Digital becomes a little bit more complicated. What I like to touch on here specifically are emails. Right now, our city system allows you as board members to receive emails through the city system to you personally. Our server has a copy of all those emails, so you don't have to worry about them. Your responses from your personal email addresses are not on the city server. So what we recommend here, if you get an email, you're going to copy a staff member on your response just so that it goes back onto the city server. We have a copy now if there's a public record request made. Again, you know that everything you've received is already with the city. So that's my 2-minute coverage of public records. Any questions on that before I jump to ethics?
Would you suggest, Mr. Collins, that we, to her example, blind copy you on any response we provide?
Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea.
Not that I recall doing that at all, but
It may be that you don't get that many people that contact you directly, but just kind of, something to keep in your head. If you do get somebody and you do choose to respond, if you copy Jim, then we're all good.
Yep.
Because once it gets on his email, it's in the city system and we're good.
I would say the majority of the public emails we get come to like our board email, the general address.
Which you get copied on too, right? So you probably respond rather than
Right.
the board.
So it might not be a big deal, but just something to keep in mind that both physical and digital information, just make sure staff is copied in one way or another. Last topic then for tonight is just ethics. There are 2 kind of restrictions you need to be aware of as board members. The first restriction is that you cannot personally profit from holding this position. So you can't accept any items of value or anything that might influence your judgment or might be considered a reward for a way you vote. The other restriction is that you can't participate in a decision in which you or your immediate family member has a personal financial interest. There are great materials in your packet that were put out by the state that if you ever come into a situation that you're questioning, it will walk you through. In addition, our office, I'm not going to say it's regular, but with some frequency, we'll get calls from board members, and we welcome that. We're happy to talk through a situation with you. Even if you're not legally restricted, keep in mind there's always some public optics that go into considerations. There may be votes that you're legally allowed to take, but it just doesn't look good from a public perspective. That's something you can take into consideration as a board member. Finally, if you do decide that you are going to recuse yourself from a vote, the important thing is not only do you recuse yourself and not vote on a topic, but you also don't participate in any of the discussion. our office is okay if you stay in the room, but again, just make it known that you will not be participating in the discussion or the vote. And that's it from an ethical standpoint.
Question.
Yes.
In your example of recusal, sorry, tongue doesn't work this late in the day. As it relates to public comments on XYZ. So, again, I don't think it's any surprise to anyone. In fact, Lynn and I have talked about this outside the meeting. There's going to be something on the agenda in this board that I actually have a direct interest in at some point. I don't know when that's going to be. I hope Mr. Collins informs me well in advance, because it is my intention to sit out there and use that podium instead of this one during that meeting. Prohibited from doing that? You just said I shouldn't talk, but I'm not sitting at this table, I'm standing at that podium.
You are not participating in the board discussion, so.
Okay,
would-
I understand, I just wanted it out there for public consumption, because I'm gonna light it up when the time comes on the issue. You can pass that along, Jim, if you wish.
I am completely in the dark as to what specific
That's fine.
issue you're addressing.
Jim knows.
I would say for you, be extremely clear on what hat you are wearing. Keep in mind that if anyone violates an ethical rule, the liability is on you personally, not the city.
Understand.
So,
Been through this many times.
be exceedingly clear on what hat you're wearing, and go with caution. But yes, what you're prohibited from doing is the board participation, the board vote.
All I got.
All right,
All right,
thanks.
thank you.
Which brings us to staff statements. Mr. Collins.
I just have two things that aren't on here, but one, I just wanted to, let everybody know the Algoma Boulevard, that reconstruction project started, so if, you're interested in that, you can look at the city website, the Public Works website. They have all the timeline and the detours and closures. Right now, they started on Pearl with some utility work, and they'll be alternating, working between Pearl High and Algoma. And the best spot for information is on the city's website. And then also you can subscribe to construction updates on there as well if you're interested in what's going on with those projects.
I see they're gonna have two-way traffic on High and Algoma temporarily for that.
Yeah, at varying times during the construction, they're gonna be having, so the two-way traffic's gonna kind of shift depending on what they're working on at the time.
Yeah, I saw it on the city manager report.
Yep.
I see there's also some other construction projects where no utility work is involved. They're getting some federal grant for. Are those, do you happen to know, are those gonna be like whatever surface is already there? They're just gonna lay that type of surface, or?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, and I didn't watch the last report, but I think what you're referring to is they were looking for, the state is for projects for it's called the BIL, I think it's.
Yeah, that was it.
It's something, it's the.
Yeah, they're all major thoroughfares, like
Yeah.
Osborne, Kohler, Washburn.
So as a part of that grant opportunity, they're asking for applications for projects that basically do not require, don't require like planning or any type of, so minimal, I guess the best way to say it's minimal prep work. So basically like
infrastructure.
like a mill and overlay. So what the city is applying for a couple mill and overlay projects on, I want to say Washburn. I
There was
think were the
Washburn,
two.
Kohler, and Osborne that I recall. I don't remember.
So those would just be resurfacing projects, because they have to be projects that can be done relatively quickly without a lot of upfront work. So those are just, at this point though, those are just grant applications, so you'd have to actually get the grant first. But I know those are the three, so.
Yeah, there were more than, I think there was a couple more maybe, but I remember those offhand.
Yep. So I know they're looking for applications, so the city is gonna try to get what we can. So that's that, and then there's a couple other reconstruction projects I won't get into, but look at the city website. I think the other one, East Lincoln and Rosalia were the other two reconstruction projects that are going on this summer. And then just want to let everybody know so we still have one regular board opening, and then we do not have an alternate since Mr. Beardsley left. So there's still opportunities if anybody's interested in serving on the board.
Thank you, which then brings us to future agenda requests. Should be no surprise, I'm going to ask that the Pledge of Allegiance be put on for a vote at the next meeting. And contingent on that vote, I would ask that it be the first agenda item. And then if the vote is successful, that the agenda be the next item, or the Pledge of Allegiance be the next item on that same agenda. And then see where we go. Anyone else with a future agenda request? Bill?
I don't know if this really fits there, but there's an intersection that I find to be somewhat troublesome. I don't know if it's, because it's on a state highway. It's where West Haven turns into Emmers, where there's a Walgreens drugstore there.
I think it's up, they made that West Haven too, I think, didn't they?
Well,
Yeah.
When the bank went in there.
I don't know if that's necessarily I see this as a problem because if you have, going from if you're going north, it's 2 lanes. There's a right turn only lane.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a straight and left turn, and the same as on the other side. And it's a little confusing if you're coming off of Emmers, turning left, or if you're coming from the south on West Haven, turning left onto 21. It just seems that if you're facing the oncoming traffic, you don't know many times if they're going to turn, they're going to go straight. My thought is that center lane, the right lane should be right turn or straight, and that center lane should be a dedicated left turn lane. I mean, I think that would solve the problem, because I've gone through there several times, and it just, it was kind of hair raising, really.
Yeah, so I can answer a couple. Well, first, that is a state intersection, so that would be up to the DOT if or what they would want to do. However, there's always a trade-off between doing a through left or a through right. So, like you said, you basically got a choice. You got to do one or the other. And there's some in the city one way, and there's some in the city the other way. The downside to doing what you're suggesting is then it can lead to some issues with people who want to turn right, because then obviously they have to wait for the people that are going through. So that usually leads to an increase in rear end accidents and things like that. But then there's a downside to doing it the other way, which is what it currently is. So it's kind of a horse apiece when you look at the trade-off. However, I can ask the state what their opinion is on it. I know I've asked them, I can't remember if it was that intersection, but it was in that area. And they've looked at some other things. They said it was 50-50 one way or the other, but I'll ask them, see what they say.
I can see your point, Jim, because if the first car in the right lane is going straight,
Right.
everybody else is turning right, you're going to have a backup.
Yep, and then you get people get impatient.
Right. Correct.
And it's kind of a short stacking with that Westtown Boulevard right
Right.
there.
Right.
That is a very worrisome intersection. Is there any way we could do something with paint and at least keeping it straight? Because as you come out of the previously Emmers side of it, you're head on with the traffic turning towards Omro.
And you got a lot of lanes.
Yeah.
And
too, you know.
people are crossing over or whatever have you, and it does split from 1 to 2 when you're going south, going from 2 to 1 when you're going north, and sometimes people are just all over
Right.
that intersection.
And a lot of people don't signal either.
Nope. Yep. I use that intersection all the time. It's a mess.
I don't know, would there be any statistics on that particular
Yeah,
intersection?
yeah. I'll ask the state to take a look at it, but I can look at the crash history, but it's ultimately their jurisdiction, so they'll have to decide if or what they want to do. But I can at least, I'll forward the concern to them and see what they say, and I can report back with what I get.
Okay.
One place where I always have run into a lot of problems is like coming out of Target and going towards Fazoli's and Spectrum. Like there's no sign there if it's left to differentiate between the left and straight, except I think I painted on the thing. You know, it'd be nice if you had a sign there so people in advance could get in the proper lane they wanted, you know? Because then I get people that are in the, you know, trying to make a move from this lane when they should be in the other lane.
You're talking about exiting Target?
Yeah,
Yeah,
at that
between-
traffic light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's that little stop sign by the corner of Target, and then you got the traffic light, you know, up there. There's, you know, some room for only a couple cars to stack there. There's 2 lanes, you know, and I don't recall offhand which is which, but there's, you know, obviously you got the 3 things, left, straight, and right. I can't remember how they're differentiated, but
Yeah.
like I said, some people are always trying to do the thing that they shouldn't be doing there, you know.
Right. That one's difficult
This is
because,
private
Property.
right, you'd want to put, you know, generally if it was a public intersection, we'd put the lane designation signs, but in that case.
I think there's one on the other side by Spectrum, you know, going south, I guess that it would be.
Yeah, I'm not
But
sure. where
there's
we'd
not
put
one
it.
going, there's not one going north, and like I said, you know, the majority of times I run into somebody trying to do the maneuver that they should be in the other lane for.
Yeah, I don't know that we can do much about that, but
Yeah.
I'll.
I just thought I'd bring it up, because like I said, you know, I always seem to have a hassle with that.
Anyone else with a future agenda request? I do have another one, actually 2 more that I thought of while I was sitting here. The intersection at Bowen and Merritt, traffic light. Gas station on the corner, pizza place on the other corner, forgive me, Ratch and Deb's, I believe.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay. Anyway, so familiar with the intersection. I had someone not all that long ago bend my ear for quite a while because they were actually sitting at that corner at a red light with no traffic. Are there anything in the offing with that traffic signal?
No, I'm trying to think. So it must have, that's an older intersection, so I'm guessing that, I'll have to check, but I'm guessing that we have loops there for vehicle detection, but I don't know that for a fact. I guess I have to check and see how it's actuated first, if it's loops or if it could either be loops, cameras, or timed. If it's timed, that's the most likely scenario. If it's timed, then that'll happen because there's no vehicle detection. If there's vehicle detection, that probably shouldn't happen as often.
I'm pretty sure there's not cameras because I
Yeah.
drive through there all the time. I've never, or
Right.
at least can recall, had a problem. But this
I'll have to
person
see how it's actuated.
seemed to have. And then the other item is, have we heard from Canadian National as to what they intend to do with track maintenance on the east side of town? Because there's a few that'll tear the oil pan off the old beast if you're not careful. As you get across.
I'm not familiar with, usually Public Works deals with that. But I can ask, is there anyone in particular? I know they did work on Washington, was it a year or 2 ago? And I know they've worked intermittently on some of those, but if there's anyone in particular, we can always
I
ask.
saw sparks fly in Irving the other
Irving.
day.
Irving's a wreck.
Okay.
I think it's a lot better than it used to be years ago, though, you know. Especially when we had the 2 trains, you know.
Unfortunately, with train tracks, the frost and thaw will buckle those crossings pretty quickly. So, again, if Public Works has any input with CN maintenance,
Yep.
Irving's the one that's the highest priority in my humble opinion. But
Yeah, we can ask.
and it doesn't seem to be so bad going west as it is east, but obviously. All right. last call for any future agenda requests. Now, before I ask that we adjourn, it was pointed out to me in my read of the manual provided to us by city legal staff that I can't get a voice vote for adjournment. We need to actually roll call adjournment. So I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn, but once I get it, don't be surprised when I ask for a roll call for adjournment. It's the only reason I brought it up. So,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
please call the roll on adjournment.
Juan Schneider,
Aye.
Jazinski.
Aye.
Christensen,
Aye.
Hanson,
I
Becker.
Aye. We are adjourned.